You have been lied to about power. Every book you read, every mentor you trusted, every strategy you followed, they all told you the same thing. Go after what you want with everything you have. Chase harder, network more, prove your worth, show them what you are made of. And you believed it. You chased, you hustled, you bent yourself into shapes no human spine was designed to hold. Give me 27 minutes. That is all I need. Because by the end of this, you will understand why everything you were taught about getting what you want was designed to keep you from ever having it. There was a man who understood this 5 centuries ago. His name was Machiavelli, and the lesson he left behind is the most dangerous psychological truth ever committed to paper. It is not about manipulation. It is not about cruelty. It is about gravity. And you have been running in the wrong direction your entire life. There is a pattern you have been living inside for so long that you cannot see it anymore. It has become the water you swim in, the air you breathe. It is so deeply woven into how you operate that you mistake it for your personality. You chase. You chase approval from people who have never once paused to earn yours. You chase opportunities by proving over and over that you deserve a seat at a table that was never yours to begin with. You chase love by being more available, more accommodating, more willing to abandon your own needs than the person standing next to you. And you call this effort, you call it dedication, you call it being a good person. But there is a word for what you are actually doing, and it is far less flattering. You are broadcasting weakness, not because wanting things is weak, wanting things is human, but the way you pursue them, the frantic, anxious, desperate reaching, sends a signal to every person and every system you interact with. That signal says, I do not believe I am enough without this. And people receive that signal with surgical precision. They may not be able to name it, but they feel it. They feel the weight of your need pressing against them, and they do what every human being does when they sense desperation. They step back. The cruel irony is that the harder you chase, the faster everything retreats. Relationships, promotions, respect, creative breakthroughs, they all obey the same invisible law. And this law was not discovered in a psychology lab or a meditation retreat. It was discovered in the blood-soaked political landscape of Renaissance Italy by a man who lost everything before he understood anything. In the autumn of 1512, Machiavelli's world collapsed. He had spent 14 years as a senior diplomat for the Florentine Republic. He had negotiated with kings. He had studied the mechanics of power at the highest levels of European politics. He was sharp, respected, and deeply embedded in the machinery of the state. Then the Medici family returned to Florence. The Republic fell, and Machiavelli was not simply removed from office. He was arrested, accused of conspiracy, thrown into a cell in the Bargello prison. They hung him from his wrists with rope, a torture method called the strappato, and dropped his body weight against his own shoulder joints. Again and again. He did not break. He maintained his innocence. Eventually he was released, not vindicated, but discarded, exiled to a small farm outside Florence, stripped of title, income, influence, and purpose. Everything he had chased for 14 years, the political relevance, the intellectual respect, the proximity to power, vanished overnight. And here's what matters about this moment. It was not the torture that transformed him. It was the silence that came after. Alone on that farm, cut off from every external source of identity he had ever known, Machiavelli was forced to do something he had never done in his life. He stopped reaching outward. He turned inward. Every evening he would enter his study, close the door, and put on the formal robes he once wore to court. He described this ritual in a letter to his friend Francesco Vittori. He said that in those robes, surrounded by the ancient texts of Rome, he entered into conversation with the great minds of history. He was not performing for an audience. There was no audience left. He was feeding himself. And in that silence, in that total withdrawal from the world that had rejected him, he wrote The Prince. The single most influential text on power ever created. The book that changed civilization was not born from ambition. It was born from the complete collapse of ambition. It was born from a man who had nothing left to chase, and who finally saw the machinery of human desire with total, terrifying clarity. What Machiavelli discovered in that exile was not a political strategy. It was a psychological law. And it applies to every dimension of your life: relationships, career, self-worth, and identity. The law is this: the moment you stop chasing is the moment you begin to attract. But not for the reasons you think. Tell me in the comments, what is the thing you have been chasing the longest? The approval, the relationship, the achievement that keeps retreating the harder you reach for it. Name it. You do not have to explain it. Just write it down. Subscribe if you want to understand why it keeps moving. What comes next changes everything. To understand why chasing repels, you have to understand what Machiavelli observed about the nature of human perception. He did not write The Prince as a moral guide. He wrote it as a field manual for how humans actually behave, not how they claim to behave. And one of his most devastating observations was this: people do not respond to your intentions. They respond to your position. When you chase, you position yourself below. You communicate through body language, through timing, through the texture of your attention, that the other person holds something you cannot generate for yourself. This is not a conscious calculation on their part. It is biological. It is ancient. Every social species on the planet reads status signals through the direction of pursuit. The one who chases is the one who needs. The one who is chased is the one who has. You have felt this yourself. Think about the last time someone pursued you with obvious desperation. A colleague who complimented you too eagerly. A romantic interest who texted too quickly. A friend who agreed with everything you said. You did not feel flattered. You felt uncomfortable. Something in you recoiled, not from the person, but from the energy they carried. That recoil is the same force you generate every time you chase. The chasing pattern wears different costumes depending on the arena. But Machiavelli's insight strips away the costume and reveals the same naked mechanism underneath. In relationships, it looks like overgiving. You text first every time. You rearrange your schedule around their availability. You suppress your own opinions to avoid conflict. You call this love. It is not love. It is a transaction, your compliance in exchange for their presence. And the person receiving it does not feel loved. They feel burdened. They feel the invisible invoice attached to every kind gesture, and slowly, without malice, they begin to withdraw. Not because you are not enough, but because your behavior communicates that you believe you are not enough. In your career, it looks like perpetual proving. You over-deliver, you stay late, you volunteer for projects no one asked you to take. You build a case for your value as if you are on trial, because deep down, you believe you are. And the people above you sense that energy. They do not promote the person who is desperate to be promoted. They promote the person who operates as though promotion is inevitable. In your own mind, it looks like constant comparison. You measure your progress against the curated highlight reels of people you barely know. You set goals not because they matter to you, but because achieving them would finally silence the voice that whispers you are falling behind. Every version of chasing has the same root. You have externalized your center of gravity. Your sense of worth is not generated from within. It is extracted from the responses of others. And that makes you controllable. Machiavelli understood something that most people never grasp. The person who can be predicted can be controlled. When you chase, you become predictable. Your emotional responses follow a simple algorithm. Give attention, receive happiness. Withdraw attention, trigger panic. Anyone who learns this algorithm owns you. This is not theoretical. You have lived it. You know exactly what it feels like when someone discovers your pattern and begins to use it. The intermittent texts that keep you hooked. The vague promises that keep you performing. The just enough validation that prevents you from ever walking away. Machiavelli wrote that a prince must be like a fox, able to recognize traps. But you cannot recognize a trap when you are the one building it. Every time you chase, you are constructing the cage yourself and then stepping inside. The people who seem to attract everything effortlessly are not luckier than you. They are not more talented or more attractive. They have simply stopped building cages. This is the core framework that Machiavelli encoded into The Prince, though he wrote it in the language of statecraft, not self-help. He called it the economy of force. A prince who disperses his resources chasing every threat and every opportunity weakens his position. A prince who consolidates, who builds density at the center, becomes unmovable. The same principle governs your psychology. When your attention is scattered across a dozen external fixations, the opinion of a colleague, the silence of a lover, the judgment of a parent, the metrics of a social media post, you are dispersed. You are thin. You have no center. And a person with no center has no gravity. Gravity is not created by reaching out. Gravity is created by mass concentrated in one place. The sun does not chase the planets. It burns at its own center with such ferocious intensity that everything within range falls into orbit. This is the principle Machiavelli lived during his exile. He did not write letters begging the Medici to restore him. He did not launch campaigns to rebuild his reputation. He sat in his study, put on his robes, and poured every ounce of his intellectual energy into the deepest work of his life. He became dense, he became heavy, and the world eventually came back to him, not because he called it, but because it could feel the weight. Here's what happens inside you when you stop chasing and begin consolidating. The energy you were spending on monitoring other people's responses becomes available. The mental bandwidth you were burning on anxiety about rejection frees up. The emotional fuel you were pouring into the bottomless pit of external validation stops draining. And for the first time, you have surplus. This surplus is what Machiavelli observed in every effective ruler he studied. Cesare Borgia did not beg for loyalty. He created conditions where loyalty was the most rational response. He did not chase allies. He built a position so strong that alliance with him became obviously advantageous. The same principle operates in every human interaction. When you are full, when your psychological reserves are not depleted by needless expenditure, people sense it. They sense that you are not extracting from them, that you are not measuring their every word for evidence that you matter, that you are in fact complete. And completion is magnetic, not because people are attracted to indifference. People are attracted to sovereignty. There is a difference. Indifference is emptiness performing as strength. Sovereignty is fullness that does not need to perform at all. Machiavelli dedicated an entire chapter of The Prince to the question of fortresses. Should a ruler build them or destroy them? His answer was nuanced. A fortress is useful only when it protects strength that already exists. A fortress built around weakness is just a decorated prison. Your psychological fortress works the same way. Withdrawal alone is not power. Isolation alone is not sovereignty. If you pull away from the world while still internally desperate for its approval, you have simply moved your cage to a quieter room. The fortress must be built around something real, around a self that has been examined, tested, and accepted in its totality, including the parts you have spent your life hiding. Machiavelli himself was not a saint. He was calculating, ambitious, and ruthless in his analysis of human nature. He did not pretend otherwise. His power came precisely from the fact that he had looked at the darkest dimensions of human behavior, including his own, and refused to flinch. When you know yourself completely, your capacity for selfishness, your hunger for control, your fear of insignificance, no one can use those things against you. They become structural materials, stones in the wall of your fortress, not weaknesses to be exploited, but elements you have already examined and integrated. If this shift has landed, if something just rearranged inside you, a like is the simplest way to make sure this reaches someone else who has been chasing for years and does not know why it never works. This is the difference between someone who is hiding from the world and someone who has made themselves impenetrable. The first is afraid of exposure. The second has nothing left to expose. There is a scene from Machiavelli's exile that captures this transformation perfectly. Every evening, covered in the dirt of his farm, he would return to his study. He described the ritual with startling precision. He would remove his muddy clothes. He would dress in the garments of a courtier, and then he would sit at his desk and enter into dialogue with the minds of antiquity. He wrote to Vittori, "I am not ashamed to speak with them and to ask them the reasons for their actions, and they, in their kindness, answer me." This was not nostalgia. This was not escapism. This was a man who had lost access to every external court, and so he built a court inside his own mind. He populated it with the sharpest thinkers in history. He challenged them. He argued with them. He extracted their wisdom and forged it into something new. This is the turn. You do not need the world to give you a seat at the table. You build the table inside yourself. You populate it with the ideas, the questions, the obsessions that genuinely fascinate you, not the ones that will impress others. And when you have built that inner court, when your own mind has become the most interesting room you have ever entered, something shifts in how you move through the external world. You stop arriving at conversations hoping to be accepted. You arrive already full, already engaged, already burning with an internal fire that has nothing to do with the people in front of you. And they feel it. They feel the heat of someone who is not performing, someone who is not extracting, someone who has come from a place of genuine abundance. That is gravity. That is what Machiavelli forged in exile. Not a strategy, a state of being. Here's how you begin. Not with philosophy, with action. The first practice is what Machiavelli demonstrated without ever naming it. You must identify the 3 largest drains on your psychological energy, the people, situations, or habits that consume your attention without returning anything of value. Do not choose the obvious ones. The obvious drains are easy to name and easy to ignore. Choose the subtle ones. The friend whose conversations leave you slightly depleted every time. The habit of checking someone's social media profile before you check your own priorities. The reflexive need to explain your decisions to people who did not ask. Write them down. Look at them. Each one is a cable running from your chest to an external source. Each one is siphoning power you need. You do not have to sever them all at once, but you must become conscious of them. Awareness is the first act of reclamation. Every time you catch yourself feeding one of these drains, you pause. You notice where your energy is going, and you make a deliberate choice to redirect it. Redirect it where? Toward the thing that genuinely fascinates you. The project you have been postponing. The skill you have been afraid to develop. The question about yourself you have been avoiding. This is not discipline. This is hunger redirected. The same desperate energy you poured into chasing approval, you aim it at your own expansion. The second practice is stolen directly from Machiavelli's exile ritual. You must build a daily practice of entering your own mind with intention. Set aside a specific time. Evening works best when the noise of the day has quieted. Close the door, remove the distractions, and engage with something that challenges your mind at its deepest level. This is not reading for entertainment. This is not scrolling through summaries and highlights. This is sitting with a single difficult idea and wrestling with it until it yields something. Read a chapter of Machiavelli, or Marcus Aurelius, or Jung, or any thinker whose ideas make you uncomfortable. Then close the book and write. Not a journal entry about your feelings. Write your response, your argument, your expansion of the idea. You are building the inner court. You are populating your mind with worthy opponents and allies. You are creating an internal world so rich, so demanding, so alive that the external world begins to feel like a secondary concern. This practice does not require hours. 20 minutes of genuine, focused engagement with your own mind is more transformative than 20 hours of passive consumption. The key is consistency. Machiavelli did this every single evening of his exile. Not because he had a productivity system, because his own mind had become the most compelling thing in his life. The third practice is the most difficult, and it is the one that will change how people respond to you faster than anything else. Stop proving yourself. Not in a dramatic, performative way, not by announcing your independence. That is just another form of chasing the image of someone who does not chase. Stop proving yourself quietly, internally, in the small, invisible moments where you normally scramble to demonstrate your value. When someone questions your decision, resist the reflex to justify it. Let the silence hold. Your decision stands on its own or it does not. Explaining it to someone who has not earned the explanation only weakens your position. When you accomplish something significant, resist the urge to broadcast it. Let the work speak. Machiavelli did not send copies of The Prince to every person who had dismissed him. He wrote it. He let it exist. Its gravity did the rest. When someone withdraws their attention or approval, resist the panic response. Do not chase. Do not adjust. Do not perform harder. Let them withdraw. If they return, it will be because your gravity pulled them back, not because you dragged them. This practice will feel like dying at first. The part of you that has survived on external validation will scream. It will tell you that you are being arrogant, that you are pushing people away, that you will end up alone. That voice is the voice of the chaser. It has been running your life, and it is terrified of becoming irrelevant. Let it scream. Do not obey it. What happens when you practice these 3 disciplines, reclaiming your energy, building your inner court, and refusing to prove yourself, is not immediate. It is gradual, and it is undeniable. The first thing you notice is clarity. The mental fog that comes from constantly monitoring other people's reactions begins to lift. Your thoughts become sharper. Your decisions become faster. You stop second-guessing because you are no longer running every choice through the filter of how will they react. The second thing you notice is energy. Physical, tangible energy. The exhaustion you attributed to your schedule or your diet was never about those things. It was about the constant hemorrhaging of psychic fuel into external fixations. When the bleeding stops, you feel the surplus in your body. The third thing you notice, and this is where it becomes strange, is that people start responding to you differently. They lean in where they used to lean away. They ask for your opinion where they used to overlook you. They become curious about you in a way they never were before. You have not changed your personality. You have not learned a new social technique. You have changed your center of gravity, and every person in your orbit feels the shift, even if they cannot name it. Machiavelli wrote that fortune favors the bold, but this line has been catastrophically misunderstood for 500 years. People read it as an instruction to be aggressive, to charge forward, to seize what you want with brute force. But Machiavelli's own life tells a different story. His boldest act was not a charge, it was a withdrawal. His boldest act was sitting alone in a farmhouse, rejected by the world, and choosing to build something magnificent inside himself rather than beg the world to let him back in. Fortune does not favor the desperate. Fortune favors the person who has built something worth favoring. The bold act is not chasing harder. The bold act is stopping, turning inward, doing the terrifying silent work of becoming someone whose gravity is undeniable. You started this video exhausted by the chase, exhausted by the reaching and the proving and the endless performance of worthiness. Now you know why it never worked. It never worked because chasing is a confession. Every time you reach for something outside yourself to feel complete, you are announcing to the world and to your own nervous system that you are incomplete, and the world believes you. Machiavelli spent 14 years chasing political relevance. It gave him a career, but it took everything the moment the winds shifted. It was only when he stopped, when he had nothing left to chase and nowhere left to reach, that he created the work that made him immortal. The same principle is waiting inside you, not as a strategy, not as a technique, as a fundamental reorientation of where you place your center. You were never meant to orbit other people. You were meant to burn at your own center with such intensity that the right people, the right opportunities, the right life falls into orbit around you. You do not need to become someone new. You need to stop abandoning the person you already are. Every act of chasing was an act of self-betrayal. Every time you adjusted your personality to fit someone else's expectations, you told yourself that the original version was not enough. It was always enough. You simply never gave it the chance to prove its gravity. Machiavelli, alone in his study, dressed in the robes of a man the world had forgotten. He was not pretending to be someone else. He was finally allowing himself to be exactly who he was, a thinker, a strategist, a man whose mind was his most dangerous weapon. The world did not give him permission to write The Prince. He did not ask for it. That is the final lesson. Gravity does not ask permission. It does not negotiate. It does not explain itself. It simply exists, and everything that belongs in its orbit arrives. Understanding gravity is not the same as possessing it. Knowledge without practice is decoration. It hangs on the wall and changes nothing. So here is what you actually do with everything you have just learned. Not tomorrow, not when the conditions are perfect. Now. The first practice is what Machiavelli demonstrated every evening in that cold farmhouse, and what most people have never once attempted in their entire lives: deliberate self-audience. Every day, you set aside a window of time, even 15 minutes, where you sit with your own mind as though it were the most fascinating text you have ever encountered. You do not scroll, you do not distract, you do not reach for comfort. You ask yourself 3 questions. What am I actually feeling right now, beneath the surface story I am telling myself? What did I chase today that I did not need? And what part of myself did I suppress to make someone else comfortable? You write the answers, not for an audience, not for social media, for yourself. This sounds simple, it is not. The first time you sit in genuine self-audience, you will feel a violent urge to escape. Your hand will reach for your phone, your mind will generate a sudden urgent task, your body will grow restless. That restlessness is the sound of your scattered energy resisting consolidation. Let it resist. Stay seated. The discomfort is the heat of the furnace doing its work. Machiavelli did not write The Prince because inspiration struck him like lightning. He wrote it because he showed up to his own desk, night after night, and refused to let his mind remain scattered across the fields and the taverns and the petty grievances of exile. He gathered himself. Literally. You must do the same. The second practice is harder. It requires you to identify your specific leaks, the places where your psychic energy is draining into external vessels that give nothing back. Think of your attention over the past week. Where did it go? How many hours did you spend analyzing someone else's behavior, decoding a text message, replaying a conversation, rehearsing what you should have said? How many minutes did you lose to monitoring whether someone approved of you? Checking likes, measuring responses, scanning faces for signs of acceptance. Each of those moments was a transfer of energy, your energy flowing outward into a vessel you do not control. The practice is specific. When you catch yourself in an obsessive loop about another person, their opinion, their behavior, their silence, you do not fight the obsession. You redirect it. You take the exact intensity of that fixation and you aim it at something that builds your own density. If you spent 30 minutes dissecting why someone did not respond to your message, you now spend 30 minutes on the project that terrifies you most. The book you have not started, the skill you keep postponing, the confrontation with yourself you have been avoiding for years. This is not willpower. This is hydraulics. The energy exists. It is already flowing. You are simply changing the direction of the pipe. Machiavelli could have spent every evening in that farmhouse writing letters to the Medici, begging for reinstatement. He could have consumed himself with bitterness and obsession over the men who had replaced him. Instead, he took that exact energy, the rage, the ambition, the desperate need to matter, and he poured it into the most concentrated intellectual work of his life. He did not suppress his desire for relevance. He alchemized it. He turned outward-reaching desperation into inward-building creation. The pipe changed direction, the pressure remained, and what emerged was something the world could not ignore. The third practice is the one that will feel most unnatural. It is the practice of strategic stillness in moments where every instinct screams at you to act. Someone pulls away from you. Your instinct is to chase, to send the message, to explain yourself, to close the gap before it widens. Do not move. Someone criticizes you publicly. Your instinct is to defend, to correct, to prove them wrong with evidence and urgency. Do not move. An opportunity appears to slip away. Your instinct is to grasp, to compromise, to lower your price just to stay in the game. Do not move. This stillness is not passivity. It is the most aggressive act of self-possession available to you. It is the declaration, made not with words but with presence, that you are not governed by the reactions of others. Machiavelli observed this principle in every successful ruler he studied. The leaders who lasted were not the ones who responded fastest. They were the ones who could tolerate the tension of not responding and let that tension work in their favor. When Cesare Borgia's enemies conspired against him at Sinigalia, he did not react with visible panic. He did not scramble. He waited. He let them believe they had the upper hand, and then in one decisive movement, he ended the conspiracy entirely. The stillness was not weakness. It was compression. It was the gathering of force before the strike. You practice this in small moments first. Someone says something designed to provoke you. You breathe. You let 3 seconds pass before you respond. In those 3 seconds, you reclaim your center. Those 3 seconds are where gravity is built. Over time, you extend the window. 3 seconds becomes 3 minutes. 3 minutes becomes 3 hours. 3 hours becomes the permanent posture of a person who is no longer jerked around by the emotional weather of others. You become the person in the room who does not flinch, and the world, confused and fascinated by your stillness, leans in. There is a reason these practices feel difficult. They require you to carry something most people spend their entire lives avoiding: yourself. The full, unedited weight of your own existence, your ambitions, your darkness, your unfulfilled potential, your grief over the years you spent chasing instead of building. Most people distribute this weight across other people. They hand pieces of themselves to friends, lovers, mentors, audiences, anyone willing to hold it for a while. And when those people leave or fail or simply lose interest, the weight crashes back, and it feels like devastation. But it was always your weight. It was always meant to be carried by you alone. When you accept this, not with resignation, but with the fierce pride of someone who has finally stopped outsourcing their own existence, something shifts in your posture, in your voice, in the way you occupy a room. People cannot name what changed, but they feel it. They feel that you are no longer leaning on them, no longer reaching toward them, no longer silently asking them to complete something in you. You are complete, heavy, present, and that heaviness is not a burden. It is the raw material of gravity. Machiavelli never got his political career back. The Medici read The Prince. They acknowledged it, but they never restored him to the position he craved. By the standards of his original ambition, he failed. But here is what he built instead: a work that has been read continuously for over 500 years, a framework for understanding power that outlasted every prince, every pope, and every republic of his era, a name that became synonymous with strategic intelligence itself. He did not get what he chased. He got something far larger, something that could only have been created by a man who had stopped chasing and started building from his own center. This is the paradox you must accept. The thing you are desperately reaching for may never arrive in the form you expect. But what you build while you stop reaching, the density, the depth, the gravitational pull of a fully inhabited self, will attract things you never thought to ask for. Not because the universe rewards self-improvement. Machiavelli would have laughed at such mysticism, because humans are drawn to substance. They orbit weight, they follow gravity, and gravity cannot be faked. It can only be built slowly, painfully, through the relentless act of becoming more fully yourself. If you want to keep building, subscribe. This is how we think here, and there's much more coming. The life you want is not on the other side of effort. It is on the other side of gravity. Thank you for being here. I will see you in the next one.